I came back from a vacation fling with HIV, my marriage ended before I even had a chance to explain, and I don't even remember the guy's name. I'm Kayla, 29, married to Evan, 32, for 5 years. He works as an electrical engineer, and I was a marketing coordinator at a small tech company. We lived comfortably but had been going through a rough patch, feeling more like roommates than passionate partners. 8 months ago, I went on a girls' trip to Costa Rica with 3 college friends who were all single and living exciting lives while I felt trapped in suburban routine. The trip was supposed to be a chance to reconnect with my fun side and remember who I was before marriage. During our second night in San Jose, we went to an upscale beach club where I met an attractive local guy who was charming, confident, and made me feel desired in ways I hadn't experienced in years. He was everything Evan wasn't: spontaneous, romantic, and completely focused on making me feel special. I told my friends I was going back to his place for the night, claiming I needed to feel alive and wanted again after months of feeling invisible in my marriage. The encounter was passionate and reckless, everything my relationship with Evan had stopped being. I never got the guy's real name, just a nickname everyone used, and I was too caught up in the excitement and alcohol to care about details. It was supposed to be a meaningless vacation fling that would give me confidence and remind me what passion felt like. I came home from Costa Rica feeling energized and attractive, like I'd rediscovered parts of myself that marriage had buried. The affair had been exactly what I needed to feel young and desirable again, and I convinced myself it was harmless since it would never affect my real life. For months after the trip, I felt guilty but also more confident in my marriage. The excitement of the affair had somehow made me more appreciative of Evan's stability and reliability, and our relationship actually improved for a while. Evan and I started going on dates again, being more affectionate, and talking about maybe trying for children soon. I thought the Costa Rica trip had saved our marriage by reminding me what I had at home. 6 months after returning from Costa Rica, I started feeling unusually tired and getting sick more frequently than normal. I attributed it to work stress and the changing seasons, assuming my immune system was just run down. When the fatigue persisted and I developed a persistent rash, I made an appointment with my doctor for a routine checkup. I mentioned my symptoms but didn't think they indicated anything serious, just maybe needing vitamins or lifestyle changes. Dr. Rodriguez suggested comprehensive blood work to rule out various conditions that could cause chronic fatigue and immune system issues. I agreed to the tests, expecting to find out I was anemic or had a thyroid problem. A week later, Dr. Rodriguez called and asked me to come in immediately to discuss my test results. Her voice sounded serious in a way that made my stomach drop, but I told myself it was probably something easily treatable. Sitting in Dr. Rodriguez's office, she explained that my blood work had come back positive for HIV and that I needed to start treatment immediately to prevent progression to AIDS. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat in shock as Dr. Rodriguez explained viral loads, CD4 counts, and treatment protocols, but all I could think about was the Costa Rica trip and the nameless guy whose reckless encounter had just destroyed my life. Dr. Rodriguez asked about recent sexual partners and high-risk behaviors, and I had to admit to the vacation affair while trying to process that a single night of passion had given me an incurable, life-threatening disease. The worst part was realizing that I'd potentially exposed Evan to HIV for months without knowing it. Every intimate moment we'd shared since Costa Rica had been putting his health at risk because of my selfish decision to cheat. I drove home from the doctor's office in a daze, trying to figure out how to tell Evan that I'd cheated on him and potentially given him a deadly disease. There was no way to minimize or explain away what I'd done. When I walked into our house, Evan immediately knew something was catastrophically wrong. I looked devastated in a way that couldn't be hidden, and he demanded to know what the doctor had said about my test results. I tried to ease into the conversation by explaining that I'd made a terrible mistake during my Costa Rica trip, but Evan's expression changed immediately when he realized I was confessing to an affair. Before I could explain about the HIV diagnosis, Evan was already asking how long the affair had been going on and whether I was planning to leave him. He seemed more hurt by the betrayal than concerned about any health implications. When I finally told Evan about the HIV diagnosis, his face went completely white. He stared at me in silence for several minutes, processing that his wife had not only cheated on him but had brought home a fatal disease. Evan asked if I'd been tested before the Costa Rica trip, and when I admitted I hadn't, he realized that our entire intimate relationship for the past 6 months had been built on a lie that could have killed him. Without saying another word, Evan went upstairs and started packing his belongings. I followed him, begging him to let me explain and asking him to get tested before making any decisions about our marriage. Evan told me he'd get tested at his own doctor and would have his attorney contact me about divorce proceedings. He couldn't even look at me as he loaded his suitcase and laptop bag. Evan moved out that same evening and refused to answer my calls or respond to texts, communicating only through his attorney about testing protocols and legal separation procedures. The man I'd been married to for 5 years had become a stranger overnight. Evan's HIV test came back negative, but his attorney informed me that he'd need to be retested at 3, 6, and 12-month intervals to ensure he hadn't been infected during our marriage's final months. The legal proceedings moved quickly since Evan wanted no contact with me and was willing to give me everything just to finalize the divorce and move on with his life. He treated our marriage like a contaminated crime scene he needed to escape. My family's reaction to learning about the HIV diagnosis and affair was devastating. My parents were horrified that I destroyed my marriage and held for a vacation fling with someone whose name I couldn't even remember. The worst part was explaining to friends and family that I contracted HIV from a single encounter with a stranger during a girls' trip. The recklessness and stupidity of my choices became obvious to everyone who heard the story. My job at the tech company became impossible once word spread about my diagnosis. Coworkers started avoiding me despite knowing HIV wasn't transmitted through casual contact, and the office environment became so uncomfortable that I eventually resigned. Dating became completely impossible due to the HIV disclosure requirements and the stigma surrounding the diagnosis. The confidence and desirability I'd felt during my Costa Rica affair was replaced by shame and the knowledge that I was now essentially undateable. The medical costs of HIV treatment were astronomical, and without Evan's insurance coverage, I struggled to afford the medications that were keeping me alive. The financial burden added to the emotional devastation of losing everything. I was forced to move back in with my parents at age 29, having lost my marriage, job, and independence because of one night of selfish decision-making during a vacation that was supposed to make me feel alive again. The Costa Rica trip that had seemed so exciting and liberating had actually been the beginning of my social death. The passion and adventure I'd been seeking had resulted in complete isolation from normal relationships and experiences. My friends from the trip distanced themselves once they learned about my diagnosis, apparently worried about being associated with someone whose vacation behavior had resulted in such serious consequences. Support groups for people with HIV were helpful for medical information but depressing reminders of how my life had been permanently altered by a single night of poor judgment with someone whose real name I'd never even learned. 6 months after my diagnosis, Evan had started dating someone new and seemed to be rebuilding his life successfully while I remained isolated and struggling with the ongoing medical and social consequences of my affair. The irony was that I cheated because I felt invisible and undesired in my marriage, but now I was actually invisible to potential partners due to my HIV status and the stigma that came with it. A year later, I was still living with my parents and working part-time retail jobs while managing my HIV treatment and dealing with the depression that came from losing everything for a forgettable encounter in Costa Rica. The passionate night that was supposed to make me feel alive again had actually ended my life as I knew it, replacing marriage, career, and social connections with medical appointments, disclosure conversations, and constant reminders of my devastating choice. Evan had moved on completely, apparently having no trouble finding someone who could offer him the loyalty and honesty I'd failed to provide. His life had improved dramatically after leaving me, while mine had collapsed entirely. The most painful part was knowing that my HIV diagnosis was permanent, and would affect every aspect of my future, while the affair that caused it had lasted only a few hours with someone I couldn't even identify. 2 years later, I was still dealing with the ongoing medical, financial, and social consequences of my Costa Rica affair while Evan was engaged to someone new and building the family life I destroyed through my selfish pursuit of excitement. The vacation fling that was supposed to remind me what passion felt like had instead taught me that some moments of poor judgment create consequences that last forever, destroying everything stable and valuable in pursuit of temporary thrills.